Let's point out right at the front here, we have not contacted Oliver Stone, nor have we heard that he's about to launch into a conspiracy theory-laden reason for the sudden rise in gasoline prices, though even yours truly was raising an eyebrow at the pump just last night. Seeking to tamp down the potential for panic, as is our mantra here, dive into the realm of bulls, bears, and bucks with the Newsmax Director of Financial Newsletters, Jeff Yastine. All right, Jeff, here we go. I know we've been talking about it. We said, oh, don't worry. And my social media is blowing up today from people going, you told us everything was going to be just fine, Berliner. It's all your fault, and here come the gas prices now. What's happened?
Well, one thing you have to keep in mind, Ed, this is oil prices themselves have fallen very sharply in a very short period of time. Since basically July, August of last year, where they were topping out of, above like $105, $110 a barrel, all the way down to 45, 43 just a handful of days ago. So you have to expect these kinds of spikes in oil prices and therefore in gasoline prices, but it doesn't mean that suddenly gasoline prices are going to start shooting all the way back up to $3 and $3.50 and $4 a gallon. We just don't know that yet. Oil is probably right now one of the most hated commodities, just because there's a lot of people who were bullish, long on this sort of a trade with the oil companies, et cetera, and they kind of got caught with oil going in the other direction. But it doesn't mean that we can't see some buyers come in here and then oil slowly go back down again. That's the part we don't know. Is the economy, we know our economy is doing well, but is the global economy starting to move into a higher gear that the data just doesn't reflect yet, and perhaps oil consumption will pick up and therefore help support prices, especially as a lot of these rigs have started to shut down with the low prices. So in other words, we just don't know, was that the bottom last week, or is this just something that gets people going, but we still see more downside?
Do not kill the messengers, people. We are as much at their whim as you are. Trust us. A second thing coming up here, 257,000 jobs added in January. Wages jumped by the most in 6 years. Hey, wait a minute. This is good news all across the board, isn't it?
It really is. And as some of the economists who were looking at the data earlier today said, hey, that last report we got out, that the GDP report, which seemed to indicate that the U.S. economy wasn't growing quite as fast as we had thought initially coming out of the holidays. Well, maybe the U.S. economy really is growing faster. Maybe consumers are actually picking up more of the burden here in terms of pushing the economy forward. And this seems to imply that, but it also pays to remember that the folks who keep the data at the federal government can go back and revise the data that they've issued a month or 2 months prior. We see that a lot of times too. So in this case, they revised the data higher from November and December, as well as what they saw in employment in January. But it doesn't mean that later on, a month from now, they may go back and say, well, you know what, we took a second look at the data. Turns out the hiring in January wasn't quite as strong as we thought. There is some good stuff in there as well, though, on wage gains. They're starting to see better wages. Employers are starting to realize they have to pay up more to get employees, good employees, and that's something that's good for Americans and spending going forward for the economy.
Average hourly wages, 12 cents up in January, $24.75, sharpest gain since 2008. Okay, a minute to go. One last thing here. Pacific Maritime Association represents employers. They're talking about an all-in offer to the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, 9 months of contract talks, maybe a port strike. Maybe. But that would really put a bind on things, because the last time this happened out on the West Coast, it took 6 months to recover.
Yeah, it's funny how these things tend to happen, it seems, when the economy is beginning to expand and employers, companies, factories need their material. They need their components. They need their raw materials. And so much of this is coming out of factories in Asia, in China. It gets put in container ships and taken across the Pacific Ocean, and then it's unloaded in a major port like Los Angeles, and then trucked or taken onto railroad cars and shipped across the rest of the country to the factories in the Northeast and the Midwest. And so this does have the potential to certainly weigh down the U.S. economy. The last time we saw this, back in the 90s. It was something where the president had to invoke, I believe, the Taft-Hartley Act,
Yes.
which basically said, this strike, if it goes to that extent, is going to hurt the U.S. economy, and therefore they will, basically order the dock workers back
Okay.
to work.
Let's
But
leave
we're
it
not
there.
to that level yet.
Let's leave it all there. Go to Newsmax.com, check out the Money tab, and find out what Jeff Yastine and the team have got going for you 24/7. Jeff, thanks so much. Have a great weekend, and MidPoint continues.